What I'm going to do is to talk a bit about the what led to the development of the Cochrane Pregnancy and Childbirth Group, the sort of early history and prehistory, talk a bit about where we are at the moment and where we may be going in the future. Cochrane Pregnancy and Childbirth Group has been very much at the forefront of developing an evidence base for maternity care. Who in the audience have been Cochrane Review authors? A few. Who in the audience have read Cochrane Reviews? Most people. Okay, thanks very much. That's very helpful. So I was going to start with an old photograph, and I'm showing this to you for four reasons. This is the football team of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Harare Central Hospital, Harare, Zimbabwe, in 1983. And the first reason for showing you this photograph is that I'm speaking in Northern Ireland. And our top footballer was Raymond White, who went on to become an obstetrician gynecologist at the Mater Hospital in Belfast. And I hadn't seen Raymond for many years, but I was very sad to hear about his premature death last year, so I thought this was a good opportunity just to pay tribute to him. This is me next to Raymond, a sort of attacking midfielder, if you're interested. But the second reason for showing the slide is that there were a number of interesting people around in what was quite a small department at that time. The chap here was the obstetrician to the second and current Mrs. Mugabe, Graham Sellers, which I guess is quite a stressful thing to do. Mike Mbizo is a seminologist. He's not a clinician. He's a scientist, but he's currently director of the Human Reproduction Program at WHO. Our regular goalkeeper, not this one, but our regular goalkeeper, Stephen Manjanja, has just completed a really important and very extensive survey of maternal mortality and morbidity in Zimbabwe, despite all the conflict and unrest within the country. And there were others. Caroline Crowther, who's not in the football team, she was probably holding the fort at the time, has gone on to do some incredibly important work in Adelaide, in Australia, in clinical trials, and she's very much involved in the Cochrane Pregnancy and Childbirth Group as well, and I'll come back to her later. So it was really just to say that every now and again within our careers we find ourselves in a situation where there are really talented, committed, energetic people, and these are opportunities that really should be seized and cherished, and all the sort of synergies that occur when you have a group of people like that. Third reason for showing you it is that as just tying in with the theme of this meeting, that as a young obstetrician, it was learned so many different things from this experience. We were incredibly busy. We were overseeing 40,000 deliveries per year in the service, and 20,000 births took place in clinics run by midwives scattered throughout the city of Harare, and 20,000 occurred within the central hospital. And this is where the partogram was developed as a practical tool, because cephalopelvic disproportion is common, and this was a way of getting women who were running into mechanical problems during labour into the hospital. But an important lesson for me was just how much can be achieved by good clinical skills, careful histories, detailed clinical examination, and really reinforced to me that technology exists to complement clinical assessment and not to replace it. And the fourth reason for showing the slide is that this football pitch is where I first got drawn into what eventually became the Cochrane Pregnancy and Childbirth Group. I walked off the pitch one Friday afternoon and met somebody who had been watching the football match, and it turned out this was somebody called Ian Chalmers, who was then director of the National Perinatal Epidemiology Unit in Oxford. And Ian has an incredible ability of pulling people into his big project. And we got talking, and as a result of that, I became very much involved in what became the Cochrane collaboration. So this is Ian Chalmers on the left here. This is at a meeting in Liverpool to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Cochrane Pregnancy and Childbirth Group. And Ian is with Murray Enkin, who is now retired. He was an obstetrician in Canada, and Mark Hearse, who was an obstetrician who moved to Australia. And what you see in front of them are some of the products that they, in particular, led the development of during the 1980s, which were the forerunners of what became the Cochrane collaboration. And there's the big 2-volume book, which is Effective Care in Pregnancy and Childbirth, published in 1989, which was the first textbook in healthcare that formally used research synthesis as a basis for making recommendations. So looking at the evidence and basing recommendations on that evidence. There was a smaller book there which was published early in the 1980s, which was really quite iconoclastic, and really it's thinking back, it's odd just how threatening this whole project appeared to some people at the time. That there was a vice president of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists who described Ian Chalmers as the leader of a sort of obstetric Baader-Meinhof group. And the idea of evidence really was regarded as quite threatening, as were some of the other things that were pioneered at that time. The multidisciplinary working was really quite novel. Obstetricians, midwives, social scientists, qualitative researchers, all working together in this common project. Engagement with consumers was really very innovative at the time as well. And also there was recognition, this is the Oxford Database of Perinatal Trials, there was also recognition back then, really with very crude IT, that it was important that clinicians need up-to-date information, and to be up-to-date there is a need for electronic publication rather than reliance of the very kind of slow paper-based books. So that's really where, so what was achieved in the perinatal field really was the basis of what happened, where the Cochrane collaboration was developed to tackle all aspects of healthcare. And just to remind you what the Cochrane collaboration is all about, it's an international organisation, aims to help people make well-informed decisions about healthcare by preparing, maintaining and promoting the accessibility of systematic reviews, so scientific, formal scientific reviews of the effects of healthcare interventions. And that is mainly but not exclusively reliant on randomised controlled trials as the gold standard method of assessing the effectiveness of clinical interventions. And there are a number of examples of reviews which have had a major impact. One of the most important, I think, is the review on continuous support for women during childbirth. Lead author is Ellen Hodnett, a midwife in Toronto, who's one of our editors. working with Simon Gates, who's our statistician, Justice Hofmeyr, another editor based in South Africa, and Carol Sakala, a consumer representative from the US. And this is the kind of updated version of the review. 15 trials, almost 13,000 women, and it shows a statistically significant reduction in the incidence of caesarean section and other interventions with support during labour and childbirth. And this is really important in all sorts of different ways, because there are many parts of the world where women still receive very little support indeed during labour and childbirth. So from 1995 the Cochrane collaboration was formed, and the pregnancy and childbirth group moved to Liverpool Women's Hospital, where I'm based. So there are now 52 different groups scattered around the world that deal with different care, and pregnancy and childbirth is coordinated from Liverpool Women's Hospital. Pregnancy and childbirth group is still the most productive of the 52 groups by some way, with almost now 400 full reviews published. At one stage, naively, I thought if we got to 300, we would probably cover most important topics in our specialty, but that was not correct. And protocols are kind of halfway stage in the production of a review, with the background, the methods, but without the results, the analysis and the conclusions. So we've seen a steady increase in the number of published pregnancy and childbirth reviews. What this chart doesn't show is the workload associated with that, because with such a large portfolio and with the need to keep reviews up to date, in fact, the more reviews you have, the bigger the workload for the editorial team. I was wrong. We have a trials register. We identify either electronically or through other methods all reports of randomized trials in pregnancy and childbirth. And there are over 14,000 of these reports, and just over half of these have been cited in Cochrane reviews. So there are still almost half of the trial reports have not been cited, have not been covered. So that there's still actually quite a lot to be done out there. And the pregnancy and childbirth group involves a huge number of people in very many different countries, 46 countries around the world, almost 1,000 people who have been review authors or co-authors. We have editors in different parts of the world as well. We now have associate editors. This is partly looking to succession planning, and Tina Lavender, who's here somewhere, I'm pleased to say, is one of our associate editors. And we have great involvement from people who are willing to referee, from consumers who make a very important in the peer review process, both at protocol and review stage, and really important at kind of challenging review authors about things like the outcome measures, for example. What actually are really important outcome measures for consumers, which may differ from what we as clinicians might think. And statisticians, the methods change all the time, and it can be quite challenging keeping up with methodological advances, and the statisticians make a really important job. So the kind of core editorial staff are mainly based in Liverpool, but with some based in Adelaide in Australia. The Cochrane Library used to be published 4 times a year. It's now published every month. So again,